Well, Thanksgiving is waning, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. I've done two takes prior, and they both kind of fizzled. I'm a bit tired and worn out today, and I have to face a Black Friday scenario at my job for the next 3 days. So sleep probably won't be an option for me until Monday. Um, but I did sleep all yesterday, pretty much the whole day. So today I finally woke up enough to have a meal, and I'm celebrating Thanksgiving alone with me and my kitty and my cat, and we are chilling out now watching the film that I want to cover today, which is my only Thanksgiving tradition that I adhere to every Thanksgiving without fail. That is watching Robert Altman's Nashville, released in 1975. Um, I posted about it on a film group I own online about an hour ago, and I called it Altman's epic satire of American dysfunction. And I would say that's pretty accurate. I didn't put the word musical in there, but other than that, it's pretty dead on. It is a musical, and the music involved is country western music. Um, has 24 lead characters, and a lot of the actors portray um, country western singers of different kind of subgenres of country music that were prevalent and popular at that time in the mid 70s. Um, Robert Altman asked each of those actors to write and perform their own songs, even the ones who had no musical background. Fortunately, several of them did have some musical talent. Like right now, I'm watching the film. And for instance, right now, Karen Black is performing. We don't really think of Karen Black as a singer per se, but she actually was a really good singer. And so her character, Connie White, who's very archetypal, blonde, white kind of chanteuse from that era of country. Um, she she sounds good, and she also sang in another film. I want to say it was The Pikes, PYX, the horror film. I could be wrong, but I want to say she sang in that movie, and it was really great too, very briefly. But if it wasn't, it was another horror film she was in. Anyway, she looks and sounds great in this. And basically, everyone is kind of converging on Nashville for this 5 day, gala concert. Kind of like a what we would nowadays liken to Lollapalooza, or back in the day that this came out, Woodstock, but for country. So this is an excuse. Well, it's an opportunity for a presidential hopeful named Hal Philip Walker to kind of get an inroads into that culture and that community, because he sees certain people in that community as who would be good front people for his political ambitions and for his ideologies. Um, I'm not sure he picks all the right ones, to be honest, because some of the things that he espouses are to the left of the people he picks, and then a lot of the things that he talks about, which seem very populist. It is very populist, but it's more, it's like libertarian populism. That's what it would, I guess, be nowadays. So, um, like, he has a lot of common sense and a disdain for politics as usual. Um, Sick of Washington, sick of all the lawyers. Here, 45 years later, and we're still in this horrific mess that he's talking about in here. And this is more timely than ever. Because once again, that's through the prism of the artists. They're the truth tellers, not the politicians. Um, and so uh, he's doing it through this kind of lens of populism, but at the same time, he's making it very clear nobody gets a free ride, so there's not going to be any of that socialism. So we're still at this crossroads, like I said, 45 years later. So, um, yeah, wow, that's a little depressing if you really think about it. But anyway, on to the movie more itself. Robert Altman assembled this cast, and it's a pretty damn formidable cast of characters, of actors, and some of whom were kind of just starting out, just doing some of their earliest work. Like Jeff Goldblum plays this cat who rides around in a hellacious motorcycle with a long fork chopper, chopper forks on it, and but he has two wheels in the back, and he's dressed very eccentrically and does magic tricks everywhere he goes. He never speaks; he communicates through his magic tricks. So you have a lot of you have a few people who are aspiring to get into the business, who are in awe of the spectacle. One of them is named Albuquerque, who is one of my personal kind of pet favorite characters, played by Barbara Harris, and she kind of hikes her way there and seems to be getting bypassed by everybody, even though she's very polite and doing the right thing. She's very cool looking too, and she ends up saving the day towards the end in a lot of ways. But we'll get to that. Though I'm not going to give the ending away per se. Um, it's a long way to the ending. So another person who is like an aspiring country western singer is this young girl. I cannot remember her character's name, but and I'm blanking on the actress's name actually. But she's a terrible singer. She's a waitress at this dive, and she has a good friend played by Robert Duquois, who some of you might recall from some blaxploitation films, like he played King George in Coffee, um, and had his own theme song by Roy Ayers. And Duquois is like friends to several of the characters. He's kind of like an advisory, kind of a confidant of a lot of the female characters, and he's kind of has a lot of wisdom, but everyone ignores him. They never pay attention to him, and it's not because he's black. It's just because they're so caught up in their own thing. They can't see what's in front of him, which is kind of what he's trying to tell them. Their problem is. Um, the person that really these aspiring musicians aspire to be like is Barbara Jean, and they never say her last name. She just goes by Barbara Jean. Like Cher goes by Cher or Prince or whatever. It's not a one-word name, but it's two forenames, or a forename and a middle name, but no surname. But her surname probably is Barrett because that's her husband's last name. Uh, Barbara Jean is played by Ronnie Blakely, and she's an incandescent creature. She's kind of like an angel made flesh. I mean, she's based strongly on Loretta Lynn. She wears like the all white and has really long jet black hair. Um, and Ronnie Blakely has really distinctive features because she's largely Native American. And yeah, I mean, she's a great character. She's a sweet person, a kind person, but maybe too much so, maybe too sensitive, kind, caring, and giving for this business. And all this time on the road has worn her down to where she's always hovering on the edge of a complete nervous breakdown. And so her husband, played by Alan Garfield, Barrett, who's this kind of obnoxious, loud talking guy, he's trying to shepherd her in and around Nashville and through this maze of events and concerts without her losing her freaking mind for good. So he does have her best, welfare in mind. He's extremely abrasive to every other character in trying to do it. But what the hell? If you hear big booms while I'm doing this, by the way, I live very close to South Carolina, and any excuse whatsoever that for any kind of holiday, you could make up a holiday, and they would shoot off fireworks. So they've been at it all day long with the fireworks for Thanksgiving. So that's the explosions you probably hear outside my door. I'm not living in a neighborhood, riddled with gunshots. It's not like that scene in True Detective where Matthew McConaughey's doing the one shot kind of passing through the neighborhood where all the deals are going down and the bullets being fired. That's the first thing that flashed to my mind was that scene. So as you can tell, I see the world largely through cinema, for well or ill. Um, so Nashville, um, yeah, uh, it's a peculiar film. Like I said, all of these people did their own songs, and they're all in different kind of subgenres. Like I said, Barbara Jean is kind of in the Loretta Lynn territory. Um, Connie White is kind of in the Tammy Wynette sort of territory. Then there's a character named Tommy Brown, played by Tim Brown, who also had a slight cult moment or two in his life, playing in some Al Adamson blaxploitation films, notably Mean Mother. Um, but Tim Brown, he plays the Tommy Brown, who's like the Charlie Pride, the quote unquote token black country singer. And he sounds ridiculous. I mean, his singing sounds ridiculous. But what's funny is, well, what's funny is when someone really puts their foot in their mouth about the fact they think Tommy Brown is just, they think, you assume he's white. They've only heard the albums and make some kind of, politically incorrect comments about the South and blacks, and, not wholly inaccurate, but a bit insensitive to a bus full of African Americans and his entourage, who happen to be mostly his family. And this character's, her name is Opal. She works for the BBC, and she's this incredibly pretentious character played by Geraldine Chaplin. She's like a groupie, she kind of does want to be a star fucker, and she does manage to achieve that with one character I'll get to in a few minutes. Um, but she's really just a hanger on. She's just stunningly insincere, always saying what she thinks is the canned, uh, contrived thing to say to someone. Um, she's just a really obnoxious character, but she helps kind of drive the action, because she's the outsider looking in, and not necessarily an audience surrogate, because you really can't identify with her, but she does kind of give you that kind of roving reporter, sussing out what's going on. He uses several techniques to kind of maneuver through this dense melange of characters and subplots. That's one of them. Another one is the aforementioned politician Hal Philip Walker, who you never meet in person. He rides around Nashville in this van with this giant megaphone, and through his speakers he discusses his views on politics, and gives these kind of truisms, or what he sees them as truism, these kind of aphorisms about politics, and some of them are like not practical. Some of them are like jokes, one-liners. Some of them are like uh, show some wisdom. Some of them are kind of cynical and caustic. Some of them are just kind of like down home, homespun wisdom, like Will Rogers kind of stuff. Um, so he's kind of a guy who is in a way a relic, holding on to the old values of America, but in another way trying to destroy the establishment that's become encrusted all over Washington and got it in a stranglehold. So once again, these kind of struggles are still going on today in America. And I'm not going to keep beating you over the head with that, because I'm sure anyone watching this is very well aware of that. But anyway, anyone watching this movie, I'm sure can see the parallels, not only with what Altman was saying about America being so divided in 1975, but very prescient about divided America in 2020. Lily Tomlin plays a gospel singer, and she has some children who are ironically deaf. And our British reporter says, "Oh, that's so horrible. Oh, it's so depressing. No." Which is like such a horrible and insensitive, like her kids aren't human or something, and she's like, no, it's okay. And you have a folk trio, Tom, Frank, and Mary, and is that right? Tom, Frank, Tom, Bill, and Mary? I'm forgetting the guy's name. I apologize. Christina Rains plays Mary. And Tom, his name is Tom Frank. Tom is played by none other than Keith Carradine, one of my favorite actors. This was his first kind of major role. I mean, he had been in some minor parts. He had been in the science fiction film, incredibly underrated, obscure science fiction film, Idaho Transfer, directed by Peter Fonda. And he actually wasn't even the main character. But he had appeared in Altman's McCabe and Mrs. Miller prior to this, and apparently they, according to the extras on here, they just had a little conversation and boom, he was in the movie. And he already was doing music of his own too. He was a kind of a multi-talented guy, and he writes two key songs, maybe the two key songs on the soundtrack, and maybe the most musically satisfying ones on the soundtrack. Uh, One is "It Don't Worry Me," which you hear him playing a lot. He plays his own music to himself constantly. You know, he's kind of on a constant ego trip, and he's quite a Lothario. He's basically trying to bed down like every other eligible female in the cast, or they're trying to, seduce him, and it's so ironic because he does, he sleeps with Opal, the BBC reporter, and there's a character who is a total groupie, L.A. Joan, played by Shelley Duvall, in this insane outfit, and to her bemused father, Keenan Wynn's disgust, like, what the hell? He thought her name was Martha, and she was an ordinary girl, and she went traveling and came back as this kind of hippie groupie. I don't even know if hippie's the right word. She's way out looking. Looks like an underground comics character of the '70s. Um, and Keith Carradine comments on how her diet is ruining her because she's really, really thin. And but Shelley was always a really slender lady. But she's great in this part. She's pretty adorable. I mean, she's not really a likable or an unlikable character. She's kind of oblivious to everything except just getting near the stars. And she does get near Tom, and rather near. And he, and throughout the course of this, is trying to get with one woman in particular. It's like the one he can't get, the one who he has the least shot with, and she's the least traditionally attractive physically woman of all the ones that are after him or that he's after. But she's the most attractive to him, and she's the biggest challenge, and that's Lily Tomlin's character. And so it's kind of fascinating when he finally gets her, though. You think that's going to be like his redeeming quality, but no, he's really callous and different. He's always got to have a different woman, but he's always got to have a woman. He's always got to constantly have the fame, constantly hearing his own music, his own voice, and of course he's fucking Mary, who's in his group, who's married to the other guy in the group, and there's this horrible boiling tension there, and that's an ironic pairing because a few years later, 2 years later, Keith Carradine and Christina Rains played husband and wife in The Duelists, the awesome first movie by Ridley Scott, which really needs to be on Blu-ray pretty badly. Um, so yeah, there's like so many cross currents and characters. There's a couple of characters that are kind of drifters. One is an army guy, and he seems really obsessed with Barbara Jean, and apparently he claims his mother, who was a fan, helped save Barbara Jean from a fire, and he wants to, or maybe vice versa. I think his mother helped save Barbara Jean, and he wants to let her know, about that connection, that bond, or whatever. But he doesn't ever get a chance really to get too close to her. He does manage to see her speaking and singing in a crowd, from a crowd, but towards the end, he finally gets, to the big show where she's going to be the big headlining act on the climactic day of this festival. And the festival is going to be, at first they resisted and fight it, especially Barbara Jean's husband, and even some of the other characters who claim to be apolitical. But it's ultimately going to be a big rally for Hal Philip Walker. Hal Philip Walker's spokesman, played by Michael Murphy, he seems to think these values in Nashville are kind of indicative of that old school American values that Hal Philip Walker's talking about, that he's trying to resurrect, albeit in an anti-establishment veneer. So there's some other notable characters. Haven Hamilton, played by Henry Gibson. He's probably the most prominent male country western star in this movie, and he's kind of, I'll just be frank, he's kind of a total prick. And Gibson was a hilarious guy, and he was good at playing these just incredibly unlikable people. Years later, he did a solid for Paul Thomas Anderson in Magnolia and played this really bitter homosexual man in a bar. And he's really cruel, but it's kind of humorous. But um, and speaking of Paul Thomas Anderson, just real quick sidetrack. Uh, if you've seen Magnolia and or Boogie Nights and have not seen Nashville, and when you see Nashville, you'll probably be a bit stunned at how derivative the overall style and vibe of the early Anderson movies are of Altman and especially of this film. And that's not a knock. I mean, actually, I love those Anderson movies. They're my favorites that he's done, the first three, and before he kind of veered off into some other territories. And of course, Boogie Nights uses a lot of the kind of camera work and use of music like Scorsese. Um, Magnolia has a lot of the same kind of mise-en-scène and overlapping plot lines and things like that of Nashville. So anyway, and that's a great Blu-ray also, Magnolia. Maybe one day when I'm on a more mainstream kick, I guess I'll talk about it, how I think about it. But I do own it. And anyway, so yeah, Haven Hamilton is kind of wooed by Hal Philip Walker's political guy, and Michael Murphy, and so they kind of play to his ego, like making maybe he'll become governor if Hal Philip Walker becomes president. And so far, according to the film, Hal Philip Walker is doing incredibly well in the primaries, against the incumbents and both the Democrats, well, the Republican incumbent and the Democrat challengers. So that's kind of interesting because it would take place about a year or so before the actual election of '76. And yeah, I could go on and on. There's like 5 zillion characters, and I've only touched on a small smattering. I'm probably forgetting somebody major. I hope not, though. Henry Gibson, I had to throw in there for sure. He's a prime mover in the plot. His wife is an interesting character, and she's kind of apolitical too, but she does confess that she really loved the Kennedys and was torn up about what happened to them. So there's a lot of interesting kind of subplots. I mean, but it all kind of climaxes when there's this giant show with Barbara Jean as the headliner, and she's resplendent, she's beautiful. Like I said, she's like an angel in flesh, and she's really a benevolent, almost holy like character, and revered that way by the audience and by the aspiring musicians and even some of the other fellow musicians. But she's teetering on the brink of madness, so there's a tragic side. There's one other loner character played by an actor I know nothing about, named David Hayward, and he comes to stay at this boarding house where Keenan Wynn is, and he plays the uncle of L.A. Joan, the groupie played by Shelley Duvall. And this guy's like totally quiet, and he has a violin case, and you're kind of assuming that he's also going to be aspiring musician or whatever. And he also seems fascinated with Barbara Jean. The military character who's fascinated by her, played by young Scott Glenn, he is kind of a red herring, though, because you start to get this menacing vibe. And, this is like a show, this is a Nashville concert. And yet, because of this unholy alliance they've made with this presidential campaign, the darkness of politics kind of seeps into everything. And so, as in so much politics of that era, there's a sacrificial lamb, like the Kennedys, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Patrice Lumumba. And there is one in this film, but, not the one you would think, but then because you never see Hal Philip Walker, right? But really the most obvious one, because, like I said, if you see it as a sacrificial lamb, that has to be someone that's very pure and very sweet and kind. And so those strands are moving, those two kind of drifter characters are moving towards that happening. and it's very explosive. It's very shocking. It's very distressing, um, but it's brilliant. And young Albuquerque kind of saves the day musically with one of Tom's songs, which he's played to himself in his hotel room over and over. It Don't Worry Me, which is one of my favorite songs. My favorite song is I'm Easy, which Tom plays in this club where his other two bandmates are also performing. He kind of takes over the show and plays this thing and kind of announces then and there more or less that he's doing a solo album and hints that he's departing. He's kind of too good for this trio. He's gotten too big, man. So Tom Frank performs this song, and it's kind of like a love song. I mean, I'm easy. It's kind of like he's saying, hey, I'm easy. You can take me to bed. It's all good. I'm a slut, and he is like a boy slut, and all the women in the place that are characters that either he's been with or that want to get with him think it's about them. Um, but anyway, watch the movie and you'll see who it's really about. You can probably figure it out from what I've said already. But great song, and it won an Academy Award. This movie was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, and that was the only one that won Best Original Song. So Carradine is an Oscar winner, yay! And I'm an eternal Keith fan. And but the film was nominated for 11 Golden Globes, which is still the record for any one film for Golden Globes. Academy Awards have equaled or eclipsed that on several occasions, but for Golden Globes, this is the most nominated single film ever, and with good reason. I don't want to discourse to the point where it just becomes kind of cliche and I'm just retreading. I think I've already retread quite a bit on several of these aspects of it. But anyway, I love this movie. In 2014, I picked up the Criterion Blu-ray edition, which was one Blu-ray and 2 DVDs, one DVD with the movie and one DVD with the extra features. Remember those days? A long movie because only going to fit on one DVD, and then the other one has to be features. But thanks to Blu-ray and microcircuitry, we can fit it all on one disc now. So I really wish these companies would stop putting out DVDs with Blu-rays together. They should be separate. They should each have their market. The DVDs can be inexpensive, as they are becoming anyway. The Blu-rays can become less expensive too, without having this other product packaged in there. That's just my soapbox for the day on that. But here's where what this thing looks like. This is now out of print, and Criterion did pare it down to a single Blu-ray. That's in print right now. I was just telling a friend of mine who's a filmmaker. So let me slide this thing open here, and it's got this kind of fold-out deal. And there you go. It's very patriotic. And these are the 2 DVDs, and this is where the Blu-ray would be, but it's in my player right now, even as I speak. And of course, as a compliment to all the stars, has the patriotic stripes. Here's Jeff Goldblum, the kind of herald of the weekend. He's like the herald angel. Herald, not HAROLD. And yeah, this is a fabulous movie, and I can't really recommend it enough. Blah blah blah. I have some friends, the Levins, who are very into this movie, and my friend Sean Lee Levin and his mother Jan is a huge Altman fan, and so he kind of let her know that I was planning to do this. So I almost didn't do it. I was so tired the last 2 days, but I've powered my way through it. So here's another Blue review with Nashville, my Thanksgiving film. And I don't know what's coming on this front next. I'm doing some rethinking of everything after my last soul bearing video. Not going to change anything radically, but I'll still be doing Blue review. I'll still be doing music. I'm going to continue with Black Sabbath, my personal Black Sabbath saga. But the next few days are going to be very difficult working these 2 jobs during this holiday. So you may not see a video from me for a while, or if you do, it's going to be kind of a short check-in kind of, arbitrary interlude video. So I wanted to get this out there before the ear of the night doth wane, and say hello to everyone and thank you so much for watching all my stuff and for the kind words and comments that you've been making on my Facebook about it. So feel free to comment down here, subscribe, thumbs up, do all that stuff. So thank you. Take care. All right. Bye bye.